Welcome to day 178 of the Donald J. Trump administration and his promise to make housing more affordable again for the normal, everyday American. By slashing rates, cutting regulatory costs, and making housing more affordable for the everyday American, Donald Trump made several promises in Agenda 47, as well as his campaign trail, to make housing more affordable again. And so as an 8.5-year real estate agent and content creator for real estate for the normal, everyday American, on TikTok, Instagram, and other platforms, we decided to create this, the Trump Tracker. Looking at total housing, looking at mortgage costs, and even measuring bills in Congress, we're looking at every single angle possible to see whether or not he's making good on his promises with neutral, data-focused, and ultimately non-biased numbers. We don't want emotion getting into the motion that we want to see. We want to see the motion of prices becoming more affordable, rates coming down. And so what we've done is we've formatted this into 3 sections. And here are the 3 sections we're going to be reviewing today. We're going to be reviewing the cost of getting into a home, buying and selling, the cost of living in that home, utility costs, food, clothing, everything in between from insurance to taxes, and then the potential of a housing crash. We have scores for each one of these metrics, ultimately leading to our housing health score, which has changed. It's actually gone up. We have a healthier, quote unquote, housing market than we have from the beginning of his term. And I want to walk through everything, good, bad, and ugly, from the beginning, January, Donald Trump's term, to today, where we've officially hit the 6-month mark. Why is this important? 6 months is important in housing because let's think about it from the perspective of someone looking to a home. Let's imagine you own a home. I want you to close your eyes. Imagine you're inside the American dream. You got 4 walls around you. There's a bathroom with working plumbing. The light in the fridge turns on when you open it. Your yard, your dog's running through it. He's tracking dirt in the house sometimes, but it's okay. It's okay. You can broom that up. You can sweep that up. You got a house. You have what every medium income earning, normal, everyday, go to work for 40, 60, 80 hours a week, working class, blue collar, white collar citizen wants a home. A place to hang your hat. Put your jacket on the jacket holder. What is that called? What's the long wooden stick where you put your scarves and hats in? Comment what that is. I forget what that is. I'm completely blanking on it. But you're able to hang your hat there. That's what we in America want. I think everybody who heard these promises that came from Donald Trump was, yeah, let's do this because I can't afford a house. And even if I live in a house right now, it's too expensive to get out of it, move into another one. So we're going to tackle the 3 sections of the Trump Tracker as we inch into the 6-month range. Because again, if you are in a home, if you still got your eyes shut, you're in that house, I want you to imagine for me, you want to sell it. Think about that. Think about you wanting to sell your home and go buy another one. How long is it going to take you from pillow talk to actually selling and buying another home to happen? I'll tell you the exact steps that people take. They go from pillow talk for about a month to eventually them reaching out to a professional. It could be a lender, it could be a realtor, it could be their friend who claims to know everything about real estate, their uncle. Uncle Tom said my home's worth this much. Zestimate says this. They're going to start to do some research. You're going to feel out how much could you actually sell your home for? What do we need to do to the home? Are there any improvements, any repairs, anything that could get me more yield on this sale? Then you go through about a month and a half of that before actually hitting the market. We get pictures, we get video, we get it on the market. Because here in Delaware, if you're listing with Loft, our real estate company, we're going to do the best. We have our media day. We get the media back. We put it on the market. It's going to sit on the market for about 45 days, more than likely, based off day on market averages. And then from there, it's going to take about another 30 to 45 days to close. So if we're looking at this on a timeline perspective, we're looking at 5 to 6 months before we actually see shift in the housing market. Hear me, because of Donald J. Trump's administration. So between everything going on over the last 6 months, we now have some results that we can look at to see whether or not buying and selling a home has gotten more or less expensive, living in a home is getting more or less expensive, and the chances of homes actually coming down in price. We're going to measure all 3 of those. I'm going to give you the score to keep up to date. But the first thing I want to do is shout out every single person that is listening. We have just eclipsed over 7,000 views of the podcast on YouTube as we shoot show number 10. You're the GOAT. Thank you so much. I can't express it, how grateful I am. We've just passed 500 downloads on Spotify, 500 downloads as well on Apple. That means on the listening platforms, we're over 1,000 downloads. Absolutely incredible. just pat yourself on the back. Want to go through a couple comments on our last video. Last show, we discussed the Fed's impossible choice on mortgage rates. The Federal Reserve in charge of ensuring monetary policy and rates are all shipshape. Jerome Powell, who we're going to watch a video clip of in this video. We're going to be reacting to a video of Donald Trump's talk about Jerome Powell. That's as much as I'm going to give out right now. Donald Trump talked about Jerome Powell this morning, and we're going to watch that video together, get your reaction. Couple comments, couple takes. I love when you guys give takes on the last video. We're a bit all over the place, I got to be honest with you, but we're going to read a few just to get the vibe of the room. This was Ruby Lahana. It's L-A-H-N-A. I'm Lahana. Ruby Lana. Every expert has been telling Jerome Powell to cut rates fast. He's doing this intentionally, not liking Trump and wanting to undermine Trump's economy, and that hurts the American people. There's no inflation. Job reports came back strong. Jerome can't even budget the budget of the new Fed building, being built more, less the world's biggest economy. Okay, I lost you there a little bit at the end. But Ruby, yeah, there is talk right now about the Fed building, and there is talk about him not lowering rates, and there is some, I think, credence to the debate that maybe because of the pressure from the outside, it could force Jerome maybe to do the opposite of Trump's bidding, maybe hold steady for the remainder of his term and not bow to the demands of the administration. Matthew WC9YL says, admittedly, you're my biggest source of information on mortgage rates and the housing market right now. Love these. You're going to love this episode then, because that's especially what we're going through. Appreciate you, Matt. Last comment we'll read. Tyler, you're really speaking for the 25 to 35-year-old age group. Love the work. Absolutely, friend. The working class young man and woman in this country right now isn't being spoken for, and I hope to be, even if it's a little, a voice. And let's go actually one more from Captain Obvious. Captain Obvious 0388 in our last show said, Zach, I alluded to this on one of your shorts, but I think you ought to look at the Federal Reserve securities held outright in mortgage-backed security data. I don't believe rate cuts will do much at all to the 10-year, 30-year bonds if the Fed doesn't start buying up all the mortgage-backed securities again. We're going to be touching on that in depth. I say touching. We're really going to be getting in the weeds. We're going to be gripping it. We're going to get two hands on it and look at it. Real life. If they were to lower rates at the Fed level, would it lower mortgage rates? Because that's what Trump wants. He's promised to cut rates from the top to the bottom, from the beginning to now, from the top to the bottom, lower rates. Jerome Powell's in charge of that. Thank you, everybody who's giving your takes, giving your sentiment, leaving your responses as to what you think is going on in the world today. So with that being said, we are going to go full screen share mode for the remainder of the show. If you're watching on audio, I will be as descriptive as possible, but on that Spotify and Apple side, you can hit that little trigger, bring it over to video, set it up, or if you're watching on YouTube, what's going on? If I'm only going to be talking to your ears today, we'll be as descriptive as possible. It's going to be very numbers focused, and I want to start with bills. We're going to look at bills right now because we're tracking bills in Congress. Now, if you're watching this video wanting to watch along, this is a live breathing document that updates every single morning. Last update on this document was 7:16, 9:22 a.m. this morning. And we are very, very, very on top of every single data point that we can possibly find from a neutral standpoint to gauge whether or not something is improving or not improving in the housing market, from buying, living, and the potential of home prices dropping. But what's most important to me is that we have some changes to come from the legislative side of things. So we're tracking currently 6 bills that could give more momentum to the housing market. And those bills are as follows. We're following H.R. 2945. This is the Housing for All Act, and that status is currently at the committee level. We're tracking H.R. 2725, and this is the Affordable Housing Credit Improvement Act, and it's currently sitting with the Ways and Means Committee. We have Senate Bill 79. Now, this is a California-specific bill, and it is for transit-oriented housing. It has a lot to do with density of housing, and that sits with the Senate Finance Committee. The S934 also sits with the Finance Committee. This once again having to do with housing density. HRTBD, which was recently introduced, I believe, by Marjorie Taylor Greene, if I'm saying her name right, is the No Tax on Home Sales Act. There's a lot of people that would like to see this happen. That was recently introduced so recently it doesn't even have a number attached. We'll keep an eye on it. And then HR 2710, the People Over Parking Act, again, focusing on density, building vertically instead of horizontally, and focusing on making more units happen. Two bills that we were tracking that are now vetoed or voted down. SB 391. This is a bill that was in Nevada that was planning to cap corporate home ownership, cap the amount of homes the corporations can actually buy. This lost. It was voted down, lost a vote, I believe by 11 votes, and it did not make its way through the Nevada lawmaking system. And then we have AB 11. Now, this has actually been rebranded and reintroduced, and it will come back in the late 2025, 2026, late 2025, 2026 But right now, this has been shot down in California to build social housing units, get more homes out there for the people that need them. And this was vetoed. So those are the bills that we have currently tracking. Let's get into the first segment, though, of the cost of housing. And that is going to be found in our middle column under housing metrics. Again, if you want to follow live, you can go right into this document. It's linked in the description on all platforms if you want to follow along. Resale homes in America are up $29,400 since the beginning of Donald Trump's term, starting at $393,400 and now at $422,800. All of these, by the way, if you're curious, are from a reputable source that if you're on the document, you can actually click and look at yourself. We get this one from the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis. And if we look from January 2025, which was the beginning of Donald Trump's term, to now, we see a pretty sizable jump. $20,000+ to now $422,800 being the median sales price of existing homes. I want to be very clear about what this means. These are not new construction homes. These are not KB Homes, K. Hovnanian, Clayton, D.R. Horton, Ryan. This is the normal everyday person saying, I want to sell my home. I'm going to contact a professional. I'm going to get what's done. I'm going to get it on the market, get it sold, and get my money. This number has been going up. Now, just for a little bit of fairness, in the bout of seasonality in housing, this is a kind of typical happening. Home prices typically go up from January in through spring. They usually peak during the summer. And as we can see from last year, start to taper down a little bit as we exit the hot season. Now, this growth is significantly more than most, whereas typically we're seeing a 2 to 3% rise. Here we've seen close to a 5-6% rise. Let's get back into our document. Total of $29,400. But what about new construction? New construction actually went down. It's down $1,300 since the beginning of his term, starting at $427,900. We're now down to $426,600. Just a little bit down. And frankly, this number actually was further down. If we go into the sheet, we'll see that median home sales of new houses, this is builders building to sell, has been pretty stagnant over the years. Really, once we started peaking in the beginning of 2022, we can see the 2020 run up to 2022, has stayed pretty stagnant. If we go all the way over here to January 2025, we started at $429,600. Like I said, it started to go down all the way to $403,700, but since March has started to climb back up to the original number, now sitting at $426,600. So home prices still going up, basically on both ends, and I hope to see new construction continue to go down again, but right now the trend is moving up. Affordable home sales in America, according to the National Association of Realtors, an affordable home is currently priced at $348,600. And if you're in the document, you'll see this blue column. This blue column's the target number. we've created target numbers for each of these metrics based off historical data. What I mean by that, exiting the screen real quick, is we looked back to see when have we seen price points drop, when have we seen the normal everyday American be able to afford housing, and at what metric should we be targeting for the Trump term that's both realistic and attainable, but also meaningful. So the affordable home we'd like to see it at 310,000. You may not want that. You may want it to be 280,000, 260, like in areas like California, you may just want this to be 400K. Realistically, 310, a drop of $38,000 would be significant. But again, we haven't had any movement here. It stayed pretty much the same since the start. Let's move on to mortgages. The mortgage rate as we sit today is at 6.72% for a 30-year fixed rate conventional mortgage. If we look at the last year or so, we'll see that this number has fluctuated. It started to drop as rates were getting cut from September through December. But once the election started coming up and it started to seem that there was going to be one winner, or I'm not going to draw lines, but pretty much November, we knew that we had a new president upcoming and the tariffs were on the way. And that's when rates started to stay similar, if not just kind of stagnant in this mid sixes, high sixes range. This has everything to do with the 10-year Treasury yield, which we're also tracking. That's at 4.38%. It's actually updated to 4.43% as we shoot this. And if we look back at the last year, we'll see it looks a lot like the 30-year fixed rate mortgage. This is the 30-year fixed. This is the 10-year Treasury. This is very common. These two follow in line like clockwork. If we look back at the last 10 years, let's look at the 10-year Treasury yield. We'll see this dip around 2020 and then moving up all the way through 2025. We do 10-year on the 30-year fixed rate. Same thing. 2020 drops. Then we see the climb. These two move in tandem, which is why it's very important we follow them. Mortgage rate, we'd like to see get to 5.15 realistically. In the 10-year, we'd like to see to get to 2.3. The Fed rate has gone unchanged since the beginning of Donald Trump's term, the last cut happening in December, and a presumed cut still on the books for September. They still have 2 quarter-point cuts. Oh, let me get back on the screen. Jeez, am I on the screen? Let me make sure I'm on the screen. Well, one-man show over here. Yep, we're on the screen. The Fed rate being at 2.25 is where we want it to be. It's currently at 4.33. This has not moved since the beginning of his term. Now, as we go down to core inflation, this is a big deal, guys. Core inflation year over year, I'm measuring right here sticky price CPI. This takes away food and energy and measures everything else. If we look at the last year, we'll see this number has gone down. We're at 4.23, and it has slowly but surely throughout the last 12 months gone down, specifically starting at the term at 3.625. We're now at 3.288. We see that tiny little move from May to June, and that does reflect with the CPI index that has gone up now to 2.7% when we do include food and energy. 2.7 is 0.3% higher than it was last month. Median mortgage as of today is $2,670. This is down $35 since the beginning of his term. So if we look at the section right here for mortgage, we will see right over here in this column of total change, a lot of green. We've had some good changes, at least at a minimal level. We haven't seen them get worse. I don't think anyone wants to see more than a 7.07% average 30-year mortgage. We are seeing slight declines. Of course, we want much larger declines as far as targets go. Next section, we have our affordability. Affordability, really wages. How much are people making versus what they have to use to be able to buy a home, what they need to qualify to buy a normal home. We'll see the affordability index has gotten 1.65% better for first-time homebuyers. That may come as a surprise for some people. But if we actually look at, and I'm going to pull up, oh, this is actually outdated. Let's pull this up real quick. NAR affordability, if I can type, index. Yeah, National Affordability Index. We go down here to quarterly, just so you know how to find these things too. First time affordability. And if I zoom in real quick, We'll see a PDF from the National Association of Realtors, which is a very underplayed document. No letterhead, no date, no signature of who did this, just a little table from NAR. 2025, this is quarter one, which is January through March. We see that starter home price that we just talked about. And if we look over real quick, we'll see the prime first-time home buyer median income. So the median income of a first-time home buyer right now is about $67,783, the typical prime first-time median income. But the qualifying income needed to be able to get into that starter home is $99,000. Hear me. You heard that right. The income needed to get into a first-time home in America right now is $99,792, just a step below 6 digits. And the median income of the person typically getting that first-time home is $67,783, meaning the index is at 67.9, which is awful. This number's been as high as in the hundreds, usually resides in the 85 plus range to 95 range, and right now is being decimated at 67.9. We want to see this number get all the way up to 95. 67.9 is where we sit. This is a slight improvement from 66.8. Not much. Housing Affordability Index. This is overall. This is everybody. This takes into consideration all people looking to buy. And this is at a 97.2. 97.2. I actually didn't update it. Let me go ahead and put 97.2. Got to ensure all of our automations are working properly in this document. And we always take feedback and comments in this document, by the way. If you see something's wrong, see something needs to get updated, we have our history tab, as you can see down here, that shows everything that we've been tracking every single week that gets updated. You see the last one was 7/14 in this tracker. And then over on the dashboard, everything here updates every 24 hours. Median household income currently sits at $80,610 per year per household. That's atrocious. We want to see that number get up to $97,000. We have not gotten an update on this number. Last data we have is actually from October of last year on this number. We'll be steady and waiting for an update and see if we get anywhere closer to a more appropriate median household income. Getting down to our last section, we already touched on bills in Congress. There's really two nationally that we're really focused on. But down to supply, this is where some people are getting a lot of positive vibes. So in order for a price to die, just basic supply and demand real quick, in order for supply to die, or in order for a price to die, supply has to fly. In order for a price to die, supply has to fly. What does that mean? It means there needs to be a lot more of something available than there is that's available. And as far as what I mean by available, I'm talking about demand. Let me slow this down very, very slowly. If there are 100 homes out there and there are 200 people that want to buy a home within that price range in that area, what would happen to the price? The price would more than likely go up. We have 200 people fighting for a finite resource. Okay? If we have 100 homes in an area moderately priced and 100 people that are pre-approved for that moderate price that want to buy, what's going to happen to the price? Probably not much. We have a very similar supply and demand in that scenario. But let's say we have 100 homes in an area that are moderately priced, ready to sell, and only 50 people. Okay, now what happens to the price? Well, now there's a little bit of pressure. Now there's a little bit of pressure because of two things. One, you don't have enough buyers to take away the supply, but also in housing, we have this thing that happens all the time. We have more supply that hits the market. So if there's only 50 people willing to buy and there's 100 homes and only 50 end up getting bought, the other 50 will remain on the market when the next 100 hit. And now we have 150 homes, and then 250 homes, and then 3,000 homes, and then 3 million. It grows. And as supply grows, if supply gets high enough while demand stays low, well, the high supply can make the price die. And that's what a lot of people want to see. And that's why watching these supply numbers here, as I hit my hotkeys and it's actually adjusting the numbers in here, I want to make sure you guys can see this. Sure can. We have total homes for sale. We want to see this number get to about 2.2 million of homes that remain on the market month to month. We currently sit at 1,082,000. This is up though, 253,000 units. And I gotta say, seasonality wise, again, it's common for spring to see an uptick in supply, but this is a higher uptick than typical year over year. So one of the highest upticks in supply we've had in the last 4 years during this span. New construction. This is a big one. This is a really big one because even before Trump's administration began, we had homes sitting on the market that were new construction, and that really hasn't changed. If anything, it's gotten more dramatic as the summer has hit, with new construction companies offering more incentives, better interest rates, more money in the buyer's pocket just to say, please buy one of our homes. If we look at this graph from the Federal Reserve, we'll see this number's been going up and up and up and up and up. One thing I would like to point out is during right here, November of 2008, there were 371,000 homes on the market. At its peak, we had about 572,000 July of 2006. A lot of people point at this and they say, well, isn't this a similar trend to the housing market crash of 2008? Yes and no. The main reason for no is that we had over 4 million homes on the market when we had those 572,000 new construction homes on the market, meaning about 12% of the total inventory we had in 2008 was new construction, and the other 88% were real people. Whereas today, we have 1 million approximately homes on the market, and about 500,000 of them are new construction, meaning 50% are regular everyday sellers and 50% are new construction builders looking to sell a home that they just built. That's a big difference. One of the main reasons why is appraisers will not factor in new construction housing sales when they're appraising a resale home. They have to find 3 to 5 comparable homes in that area, usually within a mile, mile and a half, that are similar stories, similar style, and similar sale, which means, was it new construction? Was it a floor plan? Was it a quick delivery? Or was it resale? So prices aren't given a ton of pressure when new construction is sitting, but we do have an uptick in homes sitting in new construction. Resale homes for sale sits at 557, 520, and permits currently in circulation trending neutrally at 1.47 million. We'd like to see this get to 1.85 million. So that's section number one, rounding up the cost of buying and selling a home. Right now, changes are happening. We are seeing supply uptick. We are seeing prices increase, and we are seeing a little bit of downward pressure in rates. We will be tackling in our next show next week, specifically the Federal Reserve's incoming decision on July 30th about rates. And then on July 30th at 2 p.m., we'll be going live on YouTube, live streaming the decision by Jerome Powell and the Fed. Let's move on to the cost of living in a home, cost of being in a property. This has a lot to do with affordability in America right now. It's not just the cost of getting into the home, it's the cost of actually staying in the home. So before hitting that, I want to drop down here to these 3 scores. You may be wondering what these 3 scores are, and I want to just touch on them real fast so we understand. They're called the Key 3. These Key 3 scores lead into our main score, the Housing Health Meter. The Housing Health Meter is at 4.93, fluctuates to about 50.5 to about 49, and it moves around mainly because it's based off of these 3 scores. These 3 scores are monitoring supply, affordability, and the likelihood of a crash. Supply has gone up. This is now in a yellow phase, which is considered a tight market. This is above where we were at a critical shortage, I believe, at the beginning of this term. We've upgraded. We have more supply. So we're in a tight market. You can see once we hit 70, this will go up even higher. And if we hit 90, it means we're balanced. And that means this number over here has gone up significantly in supply. Affordability has everything to do with the numbers we went over in the mortgage side and income side. What's the cost of a normal everyday home in America versus the cost of actually owning it and buying it? Affordability is at a 38.69. This is considered an absolute meltdown in terms of affordability. Crash likelihood we'll walk into. It says nowhere close, but there are some signs. Total score 49.3. Let's look at section 2, I should say, cost trackers. Thank you to everyone who listens to me talk too quickly and speak over myself often. I promise to get better. Cost trackers right now to build the home. This is very important. Lumber, steel, shingles, plumbing, concrete. Cost of getting that home made has remained pretty stable. Walking through the 5, lumber is up. This is considered a major rise. It is up $81.60 since the beginning of his term to $684 for 1,000 feet of wood. Steel remained actually pretty neutral with a slight drop, 127 down. Sounds like a lot, but at the beginning of his term, we're at $3,222. It is now down $127. Shingles remain very stable. We're sitting at about $347. Plumbing, $410, very stable. Concrete, very stable, $454. Now, moving into household expenses, this is where a lot of people point their attention. And frankly, getting very accurate, up-to-date numbers on these remains tough. We do everything we can. If you have great sources, if you rely on anyone specifically, any one table or graph specifically, feel free to comment it below. We're always looking to upgrade, expand. If there's any topics in household expenses you think that should be tracked that we aren't, please suggest them below, because right now we are tracking power per kilowatt hour, milk, eggs, bread, boneless chicken, gallon of gas, home insurance, car insurance. The only one that's experienced a major drop is eggs. Slight drop, bread, and the rest are stable or a slight rise. Power is on a rise now to 19 cents per kilowatt hour. That started at 17.9 cents per kilowatt hour. Only going up a cent is significant when we're talking about power. Milk, super stable. Milk was at 4.03, still at 4.03. Eggs are down more than 25%, a $1.18 drop from the start of $4.95. He's been very vocal about dropping the price of eggs. We could see that that has been met, and we'll see if that remains. Bread has dropped 7 cents, now to $1.86 for a 12-slice loaf. We did make sure that is white bread we are tracking there. Wonder Bread to the rescue. Boneless chicken, $4.24. This is a 27-cent rise since the beginning. Gallon of gas remains stable. Home insurance, pretty stable, up slightly. And car insurance, pretty stable, up slightly, now to $222 for a premium per month on average. Again, if there are any other items you think that we should be tracking in that metric, let us know in the comments. Want to move over to the housing crash tracker. This is located at A30 in the Google Sheet. Again, this is linked below if you'd like to see all of the information. If you hover over a spot, you'll see details of how everything works, what we're tracking and why we're tracking it, and where you can see the source yourself. I believe transparency is very important to see how and why we're getting these numbers, specifically the numbers that are right above the housing crash tracker, of which most people have been very, very interested in, and this is affordability by region. I want you to go ahead and guess. Out of the 4 regions in the country, the Northeast, Midwest, South, and the West Coast, I want you to guess without looking at the screen, which region is the most affordable when it comes to housing right now? Which one? Northeast, Midwest, South, or West? If your guess was the Northeast, you're insane. It's the Midwest. The Midwest is the most affordable place to own a home by far. And it is because the resale home in the Midwest is currently sitting at $297,900. Meanwhile, the median qualifying income for that home is only $75,000. So if you make $75,000, you can get into a home in the Midwest. But here's the big part. Here's the big piece of it. The median family income in that area is $101,000, meaning they make $25,000 more. The normal family makes $25,000 more than what's required to get into that very home. The South has a very slight edge, making $92,000 as their median qualifying income, and the median family making $96,000. That's only a $4,000 difference. The Midwest is a $25,000 difference. If you look at the West and the Northeast, though, you see the opposite. In the Northeast, the median family is making $113,000, more than what people are making in the Midwest. But the median qualifying income is $120,000, meaning there's a $7,000 deficit in what people make versus what they can buy. The West is not even close. Median qualifying income, $158,000 for that $623,000 median resale home out there, and the median family is making $112,000. So they're making less than the typical people on the Northeast, yet their homes are $38,000 more, meaning their affordability index is at the lowest of the 4. Now, with that being said, many people hear those numbers, no matter where you live, and you think, I want lower prices. I want to see home prices drop to my area. And I got to tell you one thing real quick before we get into the housing crash tracker of what we're actually measuring here. Because do you know the 2 times in our American history that homes have gone down in price by more than 5%? If you said 2 times in our history that home prices have gone down more than 5%, then you would be correct. Because although in the early 80s and the early 90s and even the late 60s, and again in 1976, we saw some home price pressure, only during the 2006 to 2008 range and 1931 through 1934 have we seen home prices drop by more than 5%. In fact, in these 2 times, we saw home prices drop in most areas above 20%, which if you're asking the everyday American where they want home prices to be, most are going to say they want to see a 20% drop, if not more. If you're not big with percentages, that means that a $400K home would be $320,000. Welcome news for most people, but let's understand what goes into a crash. In order to get a crash to actually happen, we have to have some certain metrics met. Historically speaking, this usually starts with a bank failure, crashes do. Housing typically doesn't cause a housing crash. Yes, the supply that upticks and the demand that lowers is the lagged effect that leads to home price pressure, but the leading indicator of that happening is outward financial panic. The bank failures that happened in the 30s, the bank failures that happened in 2006 and 7 led to the financial crisis of 2008 and led to the only other housing crash we have on record in the 30s, the Great Depression. So in order to measure how close we are to a housing crash, we are measuring 15 variables that show us historically that a crash is on the way. We've assigned a tier to know the risk of the potential of that happening and given each of those tiers a point system. I've listed out those point systems so you can see them. If you hover over each of these blocks, you'll see exactly how we get to that number and why we've weighted it that specific way. Now, if it comes down to any one thing, I would say the categories that are marked critical are the ones we should keep our eyes on the most. So let's walk through those real quick. Unemployment rate. Most crashes start when the working class can't afford a home. If we look at the last 10 years here, we could see that unemployment has only spiked during COVID and has remained remarkably just kind of low, below 5%. We see that as we dip back into 2016, this number was above 5% for a time. And if we max this out, we could see that anytime we walk through one of these gray periods of our economy, which is marked as a recession, that this number typically spikes up. We see it spike up to 8, we see it spike up to 10, 7.5. Outside of 2009, marking the 2008 housing crash, we hit as high as 10 in October 2009. And right now we sit at 4.1, which is down 0.1% from May, which was 4.2. Now, this does only measure U3. We are measuring a couple other forms of unemployment through the JOLTS report. This is job openings. And we will see that this number spiked as we exited 2021 into 2022 and has been on a steady decline ever since. And we also monitor U6, which is considered underemployment or total unemployment, as some like to call it. And this is at 7.7, also down 0.1% since May when we were at 7.8. So when we talk about rates and we talk about the Federal Reserve, which again on the next show we will be going directly into Jerome Powell's choice coming up on July 30th. We will be live streaming that here. Lowering rates has to do with 2 items for him, Jerome Powell: inflation and jobs. He wants to see unemployment stay below 5%. And if it were to go above 5%, that might be a signal to cut rates. And he wants to see inflation get below 2% year over year. That number just went from 2.4 to 2.7, so it's on the wrong direction. It's going the wrong way. So more than likely, we're not going to see a rate cut come in the near future, especially at this July 30th report. I just can't see it happening. I cannot see it happening. August, more than likely not. We could see some forecasted September, October cuts. But ultimately, Jerome Powell's probably not going to yield to the pressure as we have a job market that, quote unquote, is good. If you've listened to the channel long enough, you know I'm not super happy with the way we get those numbers, but the numbers are the numbers. Another one that we're monitoring is temporary help firings. We're measuring rental vacancy rates, car payment defaults, credit card delinquencies. And at the end of the day, where we're at is a score of 38 out of 120, actually 38.75 out of 120. We take into consideration foreclosures, delinquency, shelter costs versus expandable income. And if we want a depression, we'll want to see this number go high. This ratio is currently being built out to be improved, but as of right now, we're at a 38.75, which is nowhere close. This number was at 41 at one point, so it actually is getting farther potentially from a housing crash according to our housing crash likelihood. But I'd like to point us in the direction of one of the items I've marked as critical that I believe is one of the most interesting economic anomalies that we could possibly look at. If we were to look at, oh wait, can you guys see the screen right now? Can you guys see the screen? You can't. Gosh, I didn't hit the button. I got to get better at my hotkeys. Back over here, let's look at that score I just talked about. Crash likelihood is at a 38.75, nowhere close. Scooting back over, backdated yield curve. One of the most interesting items that we can look at. Why? Well, if we look at this little graph here, we'll see percentages and we'll see graph lines and numbers that range from negative 0.78 to negative 1.06 all the way up to 0.53 and 1.54. What does this mean? The 10-year Treasury constant is what's on here minus the 2-year Treasury constant. What's this mean? I'm going to give you the most simplistic way I can put it to you. It's giving us the health of the bond market. It's giving us investor sentiment of the short term versus the long term. And it's telling us, hear me, it's telling us the likelihood of a recession. So if you've ever heard of the yield curve inverting, what this means is that the number that we are looking at goes below the black line. The black line is 0%. And if we're at a positive, it means that the future looks good. Inflation will probably be low. We're going to invest in the long-term debt of the country. And when this yield goes negative, as we see November 2006, as we see August 2000, as we see April 1990, as we see in March 1981, and as we see in December of 1979, for my economy buffs out there, you may hear that and think, wow, that seems to happen before every single recession. And you're right, it does. It's one of the best leading indicators for a crash. Why? Let's look over here in the late 70s and 80s. If we look at this yield curve, it remained negative from 1978 all the way to and through, let's see, April 28th, 1980. Through a recession, remained negative, and then recovered. Then what happened after that? It went negative again, and then we had another recession. But notice the length of the yield curve being negative, how long and how deep it went negative, is usually a direct reflection of how long and how tough the incoming recession will be. So let's back up from this, go back to Max. Let's look at 1990s. We see that from December of 1988 through, when did it last go negative? March 23rd, 1990, we had a negative yield curve. Then, about a year later, we went into a recession. Okay, let's go back into 2000 where this happened. We see that the yield curve went negative for a little bit of time, but for a little bit, and then back, and then a little bit, and then back. And this kind of went back and forth all the way through 2007 until, boom, we hit mid-2007, 2008. And what happens? Crash, recession. The yield curve goes back up. Debt gets purchased back up at a higher level. But before the recession, we get this leading indicator. It's a great leading indicator, and it's been a great leading indicator for years. But I want you to look at this graph and look at what's happened from May 2022 through September of 2024. The yield curve inverted. In fact, historically speaking, it inverted for one of the longest periods of time consistently. It also hit one of its deepest depths at negative 1.06. We haven't seen a number dip that low since February 1980. So and then a few times after that in 1981, 82. But really, in the last 40 years, hadn't happened again until post-COVID, and we see it happen. Now, one thing that we know is true with this yield curve is there's usually a push back up before the recession happens. We see over here, if we go back into 1990, that it recovers for a slight bit of time before the recession hits. Then if we go back over here to 2000, we see that it spikes a bit up before the recession hits. 2007 spikes back up before the recession hits. And even this tiny little one right here, we had this boop little tiny yield curve here that led to a boop little tiny recession here in 2020. But if we look at today, we see that we had one of the longest, deepest, most consistent yield curve inversions, and now we're headed back up. This has led many people to wonder, is the yield curve as prophetic as we think it is? Is it actually the best signal of a potential recession? And really, there's two answers to this question. Number one is it is. Liquid IV and a little bit of multivitamin out of the pink cup because it's Pink Pony Club Day. The first is that it is. The second is that it's not. There's some people who are in camp number two, that it's not a great leading indicator, and that we're seeing that right now because our economy has recovered post-dramatic yield curve. There are others that argue it is an amazing leading indicator and that we are merely on the way up and into a recession. Now, again, going back into this, we see once again the longevity and the depth of the yield curve's inversion normally directly correlates to the recession. I mean, if we were to look at the early 80s and think of, okay, what happened that actually fixed this recession that was going on, it was insane rates by a guy named Paul Volcker and deregulation and tax bracket reformation by the Reagan administration that fixed this wonky out of whack economy. Today, we see a yield curve inversion and a silent depression that's seemingly going on amongst the working class in America. And so many believe that this could actually be a warning sign of impending economic doom. And if you, like many others, are hoping for a housing market crash, this is a critical category and we are in an elevated risk. Other elevated risks are car payment defaults. At 6.6% are receiving car payment defaults. These are people who are behind at least one payment on their cars. We have also an elevated risk on temporary help firing. There are less people that are getting temporary work. This is another graph that if we look at as a fantastic leading indicator of recessions. We can see that temporary help becomes very common when money is good and money is out there and companies are hiring because guess what? They have extra funds to work with. And then recession hits and let's get rid of these part-timers. Then we see it climb back up. Recession's about to hit and then we see it dip. Recession hits, let's get rid of these part-timers. The pattern is it goes up, it starts to trickle down, and then recession. It goes up, starts to trickle down, and then recession. Let's go up to 2022 and see where it peaked all the way up. And then it starts trickling down and down and down and down and down. And many people are wondering, are we just seeing new patterns now? Are old patterns just not being followed anymore that we could see clearly on these graphs? Or, again, are we walking into a recession, an economic downturn that will be seismic in direct correlation with the graphs? The graphs say that when we see a slight downturn after the massive spike, we start to see people letting go of seasonal work that leads to recession. We're not seeing it here. And that's great evidence for those that think that we're sitting in a silent depression, silent recession, and to the argument that we have an impending housing crash, economic crash on the horizon. I don't subscribe to that one, but I like the theory. I like the theory. Again, we're in an elevated risk there. Moderate risk, we have credit card delinquencies at 3.05, rental rental vacancy. Did I just have a stroke? Rental vacancy rate at 7.1%, moderate, and the U6 at 7.7. I do believe this will upgrade. Let me check. Yes, this will upgrade to an elevated risk, the U6, if it gets above 8%. But again, that number did drop. Another moderate risk, unemployment at 4.1. We have this once it gets over 5%, it becomes an actual elevated risk. And again, that's probably when Jerome Powell will receive signals to cut rates. Donald Trump, though, has been hard after Mr. Powell. The Trump administration, as I'm about to show you a clip from this morning, from the White House, from the Oval Office, we see Donald Trump sitting here and many questioners. Obviously, Epstein's come up a lot. Iran, a lot. Israel, a lot. I can't say too much or YouTube's going to start saying, don't push that video. But obviously, a lot going on. The last episode, the one before that, if you're curious, we touched on, walked through videos and reacted to the cover-up that is happening with Epstein. We will touch on that here again in a couple shows. But what I want to play for you here is a question that came in. I'm going to play the full 5-minute clip. We'll sit and watch it together. I do have to pause it a couple times so that YouTube doesn't flag us for stealing content. But ultimately, here's what I would like for us as I check and make sure. Yep, you can see everything. I'd like to show us what Trump's reaction to this question around Jerome Powell is. There's a little banter. And then I'm going to show you another clip that you'll find very interesting. It's from 2017. Let's watch this, though, from this morning.
Mr. President, Jerome Powell, do you have plans, or if you're back considering firing Jerome Powell, and what's your justification if you're thinking about this to do this?
Too late. He's always been too late, hence his nickname, Too Late.
Stop. We got to get the captions off. They're annoying. Back on.
He should have cut interest rates a long time ago. Europe has cut them 10 times in the short period of time, and we cut them none. The only time he cut them was just before the election to try and help Kamala or Biden, whoever the hell it was, because nobody really knew. Obviously, that didn't work, but he tried to cut them for the Democrats, Kamala. And how did that work out? You'll tell me. It didn't work out too well, did it? But I think he does a terrible job. He's costing us a lot of money, and we fight through it. It's almost, the country's become so successful that it doesn't have a big impact, but it does hurt people wanting to get a mortgage. People want to buy a house. He's a terrible Fed chair. I was surprised he was appointed. I was surprised, frankly, that Biden put him in and extended him, but they did. So, no, we're not.
I want us to catch that. I'm going to rewind it real quick. Hear what he says.
I was surprised, frankly, that Biden put him in and extended him.
Biden put him in. Clock that.
But they did. So, no, we're not planning on doing anything. We're very concerned. He's doing a little renovation for $2.5 billion of the Fed.
That is an interesting topic. Jerome Powell is heading a renovation on the Federal Reserve that's about $2.5 billion. Now, this facility houses about 24,000 employees, and it's 2 city blocks wide. So it's big. Don't get me wrong. I tend to agree, though, $2.5 billion is a lot of money for a renovation.
Building a renovation, and they have a close to $900 million cost overrun, and it's a shame. But the biggest cost overrun is the cost overrun for interest rates, because we should be paying 3 points lower, and we would save $1 trillion a year in interest if that were the case. And all it is the stroke of a pen. And that goes for his board, too, because his board is not doing the job, because they should try and rein this guy.
When he mentions the board, he's mentioning the Board of Governors and the FOMC.
In. So he's doing a lousy job, but no, I'm not talking about that. Fortunately, we get to make a change in the next, 8 months or so. And we'll pick somebody that's good, and we'll pick somebody. I just want a fair job. We want to see lower interest rates. Our country deserves it. We're making a lot of money. We're doing great as a country. We have no inflation. Record stock market, record business, record everything. Everything's a record now. We had the worst inflation in history under Biden, and now we have almost no inflation. We've done a great job, and we should have the interest rates cut.
So you're saying the other day that Scott Bessent, you're so happy with him at Treasury, that he's not your top option to replace Jerome Powell whenever that may be, whenever you decide what you want to do with him.
Scott's doing a very good job. I'm very happy with Scott.
Is Kevin Hassett on the top of your list?
Kevin's somebody would consider. Kevin is fantastic.
Kevin and Scott Bessent are the two kind of front-leading replacements for Jerome Powell. Is whether or not Jerome actually resigns, which is a topic of consideration because there's been rumors, even though I don't think that they're true. His term ends May 2026. So as of January, they'll look to go ahead and find his replacement. They'll begin the transition period about 60 days prior to in March. And a lot of people think that Scott Bessent, myself included, will be named that person. But here's his other possible candidate.
We have a lot of good people for that job. It's not a tough job, to be honest. Assuming you're smart, it's not a tough job. If you're a dummy, then I guess it's a tough job. But it might be one of the easiest jobs I've ever seen. And now on top of it, he's building a close to $3 billion little nest egg for himself.
It's 2.4. Just to be clear on numbers.
He's not doing the right job. We should be saving $1 trillion a year in interest. When he talks about cost, we should be saving. Think of it, $1 trillion a year. Add that with the tariffs and everything else. But he just doesn't want. He's a knucklehead. But we'll.
Besides the name calling, I want to be very clear on what he's talking about with interest. If the Fed were to drop its rate, our country would be able to refinance its debt, the debt we've issued in the form of bonds. We'd be able to reissue our debt at a lower rate. And whenever we cut that rate, we are essentially lowering the interest payment we have on our own debts. And I believe the number is about $335 billion of interest payments that we'll be making per percentile. So when he's talking about we could save over $1 trillion, he's referencing a 3% cut on the Fed rate, which is already at 4.33. So he's referencing getting the Fed rate back down to 1.33 in order to achieve that $1 trillion number.
He talks about cost. We should be saving. Think of it, $1 trillion a year. Add that with the tariffs and everything else. But he just doesn't want to. He's a knucklehead. But we'll see how that. We'll see how he's listening to this. That's a strange conversation. But we like to say it like it is. But we have a lot of people that want that job very badly. And I'm only interested in low-interest people, frankly, because you don't need. I know. So they had the 71 different economists and people experts that they picked about a month ago. I was the only one, along with one person from maybe the Wharton School of Finance. The two of us got it right. 69 people, including Powell, got it wrong. And he wants to hire thousands of new people to help him decide where we're going in the future. It only takes one good mind. It doesn't take 5,000 good minds. So they're expanding the Fed. It's the dumbest thing I've heard of. But it's very autonomous.
Just to follow up on that, sir, are you completely ruling out the idea of firing Jerome Powell?
I don't rule out anything, but I think it's...
The Federal Reserve is a private entity. I want you to imagine you work at Walmart and you're the manager. You're the manager of the whole store. You've made it. Congratulations, manager. And then the President of the United States announces that he's firing you. What? The president walks into Walmart, passes the greeters, walks right up to you and says, "You've done a lousy job. You're a knucklehead. You're fired." That is the equivalent of the firing of the private entity's leader, Jerome Powell. They are not a government entity. To fire or displace somebody who exists on this private board of governors from the central bank, which, by the way, founded in 1910 at a meeting, solidified in 1913, 2 days before Christmas, at a vote on the Senate where not every lawmaker was even present. There's a wealth trust of 8 individuals that represented 26% of the world's wealth that helped make the Federal Reserve. It is a central banking cartel that privately leads us into who knows what directions. The one that's for certain is that it leads toward more wealth accumulation at the top. I'm not voting for or standing by the existence of the Federal Reserve, but to state that you are willing to bridge the gap between government and private and turn this into something that's overarchingly just a government entity, which is what is being teased here. Even the thought of firing the Fed chair has never happened, and now it's being thrown around like it could be normal. And on top of that, let's not miss what he said just earlier, where he said, I'm only interested in low interest guys. Only interested in low interest guys. He's not talking about dudes that aren't interesting. He's not talking about hiring someone that's like, a little bit fugly. They got a kind of a weird nose and they're not piquing a lot of interest. No, he's talking about people who are going to get in, like the Scott Bessents of the world, who've already been on record saying, I will do what Trump is asking. I will lower rates.
Highly unlikely, unless he has to leave for fraud. I mean, it's possible there's fraud involved with the $2.7 billion renovation. This is a renovation. How do you spend $2.7 billion? And he didn't have proper clearance, et cetera, et cetera.
It's been 2.5, 2.7, 2.4, and $3 billion in like 4 minutes.
So that's going on. So there could be something to that, but I think he's not doing a good job. He's got a very easy job to do. You know what he has to do? Lower interest rates.
That you are going to fire him? Have you drafted a letter?
No, I haven't drafted a letter.
So you didn't show a letter to Republican lawmakers last night?
No, I talked about the concept of fire him. I said, what do you think? Almost every one of them said I should. But I'm more conservative than they are.
So he's more conservative than they are. I want to play you a clip real quick, because remember at the beginning of this, he mentioned, I cannot believe that Biden appointed and then he reappointed when he got into office, Biden, Jerome Powell as Federal Reserve Chair. He's saying multiple times here, he's a knucklehead, he's dumb, he's called him a moron. J.D. Vance says he needs to be tried for monetary mispractice. He needs to be behind bars. He needs to be fired. He needs to resign. All of this. You would think that this is somebody that is outside of Trump's control, that is put into his position by the Biden administration, and now Trump is just having to deal with it and grit his teeth. Let's listen to this. This is from 2017. I believe it was November. Yep, November 2nd, 2017. Let's play this. This is Donald Trump.
Integrity and good judgment to hold trusted positions in public office. And few of those trusted positions are more important than the chairman of the Federal Reserve. Accordingly, it is my pleasure and my honor to announce my nomination of Jerome Powell to be the next chairman of the Federal Reserve. Congratulations, Jay.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Okay. All right. Just wanted to play that for you real quick, just so we're under the understanding and know what we're talking about here. We're talking about somebody who put this man into office. So this is not something outside of his control. He put this guy in. Now he's acting as if this guy is the worst thing since unsliced bread, and he has to get him out right now, not only to lower rates for himself, the government, lowering our own debt, fighting our own deficit. He mentioned tariff revenue, but also to lower mortgage rates for Americans, which, if we look at Trump's promises, we have mortgage rates get slashed. This was in Agenda 47. Oh, which isn't an available document anymore. Luckily, we have the physical PDF saved, so I'll find that. But wow, I got to relink that. They removed Agenda 47's promises. Ooh. Let me see the PDF. I believe I have it. Yes, we do. Link gone or not. Let's go down to where he talks about housing. Now, this was the PDF that was put out with about 20 different subjects of different promises. And I believe it was promise number 4. Let's go down. Seal the border, build the greatest economy in history. And yes, chapter 4. Bring back the American dream and make it affordable again for families and young people and everyone. Number 1, to help new home buyers, Republicans will reduce mortgage rates by slashing inflation, open limited portions of federal lands to allow for new construction, promote home ownership through tax incentives, and support first-time buyers by cutting unnecessary regulation that raise housing costs. I will say, none of this has been touched. There's been about 170 executive orders over the course of the 178 days currently he's in office, and there have been 0 executive orders, bills, legislation that have been put into at least the process to cut rates, lower regulations for builders, or anything to promote tax incentives or programs for first-time buyers. So as of right now, if we're going to give a grade of to how close we are to these promises, really it's going to get a D. And the reason it's not getting an F is only because it seems like he is holding strong to mortgage rates getting cut. But here's the catch-22 of that. Here's the catch-22. If mortgage rates were to drop as significantly as he wants them to drop, it would have to require the 10-year Treasury yield dropping as well. Now, going back into the earlier comment that was brought up about the purchasing of mortgage-backed securities and things like quantitative easing, these are more than likely things that would have to happen in tandem with dropping rates in order to get the general investor who's buying up the debts of our country interested in a lower yield. To speak English, in order to get investors to want to make less on their investment into an American bond, you have to promise the longevity and the growth of our country in the coming 10 years. You have to show that this is a worthwhile investment for that person to reach that maturity date of 10 years. So the Fed rate pretty much for the last 50 years has moved in tandem with the 10-year and the mortgage rates. But we've seen that even though the Fed rate has not moved since December, which I want to touch on that real quick because Trump brought that up in that take, we haven't seen cuts since December, even though mortgage rates have gone up. Why? Because the 10-year Treasury yield has gone up. So to be clear, the Fed does not control mortgage rates. The Fed controls the Fed rate. This is the rate at which banks are able to lend with each other. And if the Fed rate were to drop, usually that sends a signal to investors that things are good and bonds normally cool. But given the weakness of the dollar, given the tariff drama, given all the economic variables, there's no guarantee that that would happen. In fact, I'm very interested to see when the Fed starts cutting rates, if we will see the 10-year follow suit. There is the possibility we have to go back into quantitative easing, which I do believe by Q1, maybe Q2 of 2026, we will get back into, forcibly more than likely, because unemployment could keep ticking up, inflation could keep reaping its ugly head. But obviously, the Trump administration's fine with inflation right now. They think it's next to zero, even though it just went from 2.4 to 2.7, and shelter is about a half of that. Shelter is about half of that total inflation, going up over 3% year over year. So you tell me, would lower rates solve things, or would lower rates add inflation to the fire? If we were to come in and drop rates by 3%, the Fed rate by 3 points, or I'm sorry, what was that, 300 points, 3,000 points? I think it's 300 points. The point system always messes my brain up. 3 total percentage points. If we were to do that, it's going to unlock so much buying power for people to be able to accumulate more assets, all while in a market that lacks affordable inventory. We are lacking inventory. So in my opinion, if you were to do it today, which of course we don't know what's going to happen in a year, 2 years, if you were to do it today, you're going to cause asset inflation. You're going to cause home prices to go up, stocks, bonds, everything more than likely to go up. You're going to cause crypto to go up. You're going to cause the value of your car, the value of a watch, gold. It's more than likely all going to go up as assets inflate. But the big question is going to be, will Trump get Jerome to move early? Resign? Fire? Or will we be waiting till May 2026, when we get a new Federal Reserve president in place, chair in place, to do the bidding, to be a low interest guy, as Trump quotes. So Trump is working toward a more affordable housing market for the everyday working class American. If you're watching this, hoping for prices to drop in your area, hoping for mortgage rates to become more attainable for the average everyday person, that the cost of living in a home becomes more attainable for the average everyday person. And if you want to see this housing health score get into the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and you be able to obtain the American dream once again, we are tracking it. And we're going to keep tracking it. The next update we're going to give on this is going to be the end of August. We'll continue to keep you up to date on everything to do with housing, everything to do with the economy, and keep bringing light in a simple way to the 25 to 35-year-old American that's just trying to get by the same way that their parents and grandparents did, as much as we can. This show goes live twice. I shouldn't say live. Recorded twice every week. And we will be going live on July 30th to go through a live stream of the Federal Reserve's meeting, Jerome Powell addressing the country and stating what they're going to do with rates. As far as housing goes, housing prices are higher, supply is starting to grow, and the cost of living in a home is staying relatively neutral in a world where it's already pretty expensive. If you have any comments, takes, leave them below. We always love reading them. And I'll see you on episode 11, because this is show number 10. We hit the double digits, guys. I feel like triple digits will be right around the corner. We're going to keep at it. We're going to keep consistent. Follow, comments. Everything's appreciated. Subscribers are above 8,000 now on YouTube. Big shout out to you. As always, with the big blue book right next to me, I want to pray y'all out, and I want to read one verse for us, one little section of verses that come out of Matthew 23. It says, "But woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you shut the kingdom of heaven in people's faces. For you neither enter yourselves nor allow those who would enter to go in. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For you travel across sea and land to make a single proselyte, but you become the proselyte. You make him twice as much a child of hell as yourselves. Woe to you, blind guides, who say, if anyone swears by the temple, it is nothing, but if anyone swears by the gold of the temple, he is bound by his oath. You blind fools! For which is greater, the gold or the temple that has made the gold sacred? And you say, if anyone swears by the altar, it is nothing. But if anyone swears by the gift that is on the altar, he is bound to his oath, you blind man. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you clean the outside of the cup and the plate, but the inside is full of greed and self-indulgence. You blind Pharisees, first clean out the inside of the cup and the plate. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you are like the whitewashed tombs, which outwardly appear beautiful, but within are full of dead people's bones and all uncleanliness. So you also outwardly appear righteous to others, but within you are full of hypocrisy and lawlessness. Therefore I send you prophets and wise men and scribes, some of you whom you will kill and crucify, and some you will flog in your synagogues and persecute from town to town, so that many of you will come to the righteous bloodshed on the earth, from the blood of the righteous Abel and the blood of Zechariah, the son of Barachiah, I can't pronounce his name, whom you murdered between the sanctuary and the altar. Truly I say to you, all these things will come upon this generation. He says, you serpents, you brood of vipers, how are you to escape being sentenced to hell? And verse 32, one of my favorite verses from Jesus Christ, Matthew 23:32, he says, fill up then the measure of your fathers. That section of the Bible is when Jesus Christ isn't whispering. He isn't pulling to the side. He isn't meeting in a private office with the religious and financial leaders of the time, the Pharisees and the Sadducees. The Pharisees, the keepers of the law. The Sadducees, the writers and creators of the law. He is outwardly scolding them in front of crowds in the marketplace, stating that you're the greedy, you're the powerful, and you're the problem. Here on this show, we believe very similarly. It's an up versus down problem. It's not left versus right. It's why we stay as neutrally based politically as we can to see through what's actually going on. The American dream is slowly being sifted out from the regular everyday American, and the regular everyday American is starting to take notice. I believe we're in a spiritual war, that the evils of this world are told of, spoken of, predicted, and prophesied, and that Jesus had a lot to say about the private equity, the billionaires, and the elites of this age. Give it a read. Let me pray you out. Dear Lord Jesus Christ, thank you so much for this opportunity for us to connect virtually. The technology that even allows a conversation like this can't go untalked about. Thank you for so much wisdom, information, communication that our generation has. You've blessed us in a generation to be able to be connected with so many. Thank you for the peace that you give. Thank you for the kindness and candor you give to those that seek your face. Thank you so much for allowing us to dive deep into a word that you've given us, the basic instructions before leaving earth, the Bible that you have given us that tackles everything from how you created, how you lived, how you prophesied, how you came and escaped time and space itself to enter our world, and then told us exactly how to live in 4 beautiful books, and then outlined the church that grew from it after that. Thank you for this book. Thank you for giving us a source of wisdom. Thank you for giving us a source of hope in a world where wisdom and hope seems to be lacking. And I pray for every single person under the sound of my voice, for peace, for sanity, for mental health, physical health in their lives, and that you will be a part of their lives, whether they want it or not, just for a little bit of peace and love. Thank you so much, and I pray that anyone who hasn't accepted your name into their heart will consider it. And I pray, Lord Jesus Christ, in your heavenly, matchless, and beautiful name, Jesus Christ. Amen. That's show number 10. We've hit double digits. See you on 11. Yeah, I'm not wearing shoes. What do you got to say about it?